anu shenogin la'asir tzitzit mitalit. The kaima, because we hold like Rav Yochanan. What does Rav Yochanan says? He says, "Betelot mitzvot la'atid lava." No, in the future, the whole reality will change, and we won't have, there won't be a Yetzer Hara anymore and all that. So a lot of these mitzvahs we won't have either. So therefore, we have this idea that burying people with tzitzit or not tzitzit is based on this gigantic theological debate. And what about this medrash that says, that tzitzit is next to mekoshesh to tell you that even dead people are chayiv in tzitzis? Oh, that's a liba de Shmuel. Okay, that midrash agrees with Shmuel. But Rav Yochanan does not agree with that midrash. Okay, that is the story. Wow, okay. So now it has to do with this whole giant thing. Okay, well, we'll see about that. Now the Ramban, right, well, that's at least one reason. Finally, we have a reason why to do this. Now the Ramban, he has this book, Torat HaAdam. Torat HaAdam, you find this part of Kitvei HaRamban, where he also talks about all sorts of things, how to deal with dead people. And he brings this whole issue of, people who say not to bury with tzitzit, but he says, Gdolei Rabbeinu Tzarfatiim nistapku bezeh. A lot of the French rabbis were very curious about this, and he says, and therefore what happened was, Rabbeinu Yitzchak ben Avraham, Tziva Talmidav. The Rav Yitzchak ben Avraham is the Ritzvah. Ritzvah is one of the Balei Tosfot. He told his students, Yatilu tzitzit b'sadino, put on tzitzis, v'yachbiotan, but then hide it, because he didn't know what to do. In other words, the Gemara in Menachot says put on tzitzis. The Masechet Chtanot and Smachot says not to do it. He says, I don't know what to do. So we're gonna do both. Put on the tzitzis, but then hide them b'toch kanfei ksuto mipnei hasafek hazeh, because of this safek. And now you don't want to, right? And he says, now the Ramban says, but I do not agree with that. I say there's no such thing. Because you know why Abba Shaul says, take off my tzitzis? Because Abba Shaul felt that tzitzis have kedusha in them. And if they have kedusha in them, they can't be buried. But Chachamim don't agree with that. And Chachamim say, Ein b'kedusha. He says, there's no real kedusha, because tashmishay mitzvah nisrakin, you can do whatever you want with them. So therefore, the Ramban says it has to do with another debate having to do with, is it okay to throw out old tzitzis or not, where Abba Shaul said it's not okay, and in Menachot they say it is okay, that means you could either bury or not bury, and the Ramban says we hold like Chachamim. But we now see at least the beginning of our customs here, what you both saw, which is that we try to do it both ways in some fashion. And therefore we have now a famous thing, that Rabbeinu Gershom, let's call it, the grand patriarch of Ashkenazic Judaism, when he was close to death, he told people exactly what to do when he was going to die. And what did he say? Beshat Ptirat Rabbeinu Gershom, the Torah brings down at the end of Shin Nun Aleph, when Rabbeinu Gershom was about to die, he said, Tzitzit Chutz. He said these two words, Tzitzit Chutz, meaning what? Tzitzit out. V'nistapku bidvarav. And everybody was curious as to what he meant. Did you mean, Yasiru Mahatalit, take the tzitzit out off of my clothes? Or did he say, Yotzium chutz la'aron, take it out of the aron to show everybody that I have a talit on even in death? Well, there you go. So nobody knew what to do, and that was the issue. And he says, therefore, the Torah says, we just don't know what to do. Some people tie it into the corner. The Ramban says not to do that. So we don't really know what to do. And we find other ways to deal with this is to remove it right before. You put it on and then take it off. All because we want to, in some fashion, resolve. Let's see for a minute what the Shulchan Aruch is going to tell us to do. Now, you could already guess how this is going to go down, but let us see what happens when the Shulchan Aruch talks in Hilchot Avelut this is going to be Shin Nun Aleph. The Shulchan Aruch says, Ein kovrin et hamet ele betalit sheyesh bo tzitzit. You bury a person with a talit with tzitzit. The Rama says, Yesh omrim de'en tzarich tzitzit. V'nahagu, so he says, some people say no. V'nahagu, our custom is lekovro b'tzitzit, we bury him with tzitzit, ach poslin tchila tzitzit, or korchin echad min haknafot. But at the or we passel it, or we, what do you call it, tie it together. Now, the Bach on the tour, by the way, says that that's not okay. He says that he says to passel tzitzit, that's not a, he says that's not a thing to do. You're going to ruin tzitzit. And from there you get the other way to do it, which is to just take off the talit from the person. But now, if we get back to our original Tosfot that we started this whole thing with, Tosfot then has another very, I call it like a simple way to explain why we do what we do. Tosfot says, I'll tell you something. You know what happens? He says like this. He says, Afal pisha hagmara cholek alav. Even though the Gemara in Menachot is against what it said in Masechet Smachot, Yesh dvarim sha'anu menichin hagmara shalanu va'anu osin kesfarim achitzonim. Sometimes we don't go by our Gemara, and we go by non-Gemara works. And that's just what we do sometimes. Sometimes when there's a conflict, we don't follow the Gemara. And Tosfos says, and I'll give you some examples. Let's see some examples. Example number 1, and this is one of the things to talk about here, is like this. The Gemara in Megillah says, okay, now you'll tell me how this works. Ready? Let's read the Gemara in Megillah. This is Daf Lamed Aleph. Now, for those of you who like learning Megillah, at the end of Megillah, they have all these fun things about what kind of things we lane when. Now look what the Mishnah says. Beta'aniyot, on a fast day. What do we lane on a fast day? Now you tell me, what do we lane on a fast day every time? Oh, very nice. And we say, all this kind of stuff. What does the Mishnah say? Betaniot brachotu klalot. We lane brachotu klalot in Parashat Bechukotai. Rashi says, you know why? Because to scare these people into doing tshuva on a fast day, all these curses that could happen. And Tosfot says, why don't we do that? We're just ignoring what our Mishnah says. Not even the Gemara, the Mishnah we're ignoring. Says, you know why? He says, because we go by Masechet Sofrim. Masechet Sofrim is also one of the Masechtot Ktanot, and Masechet Sofrim says as follows. They say, Ta'aniyot, we do Vayichal Moshe. That's what we lane. However, the Rosh says, no, that's not a good example. You know why it's not a good example? Because Masechet Sofrim says, when it's a fast day because of no rain, that's when we lane Brachotu Klalot. And that's what our Gemara meant. But on a regular fast, our Gemara was not. Okay? So not a good example. However, that self-same Tosfot gives another example. Let's see this other example, and it goes like this. The other example has to do with this festive time of year that we're in right now. And you know that what are the haftorahs that we lane at this time of year? What do we what we have? Yes? Okay, we have all of these what we call during the 3 weeks we lane what we call the Gimel de Puranuta, right? The 3 sad ones. And then after that we have the Sheva de Nechamata. Okay, very nice. So we have the 7 comforting haftorahs. Now Tosfot says, wait a second, the Gemara here though says that we read something from Yeshayahu. God says, I hate your holidays when you're sinful. Tosfot says, we don't do that. We read from Yirmiyahu, Shimu Dvar Hashem. So how come we're going against the Gemara? It says, you know why? Because Anu Nohagin al Pi Psikta. We go by the Psikta, which is against the Gemara. Now what is the Psikta? The Psikta is this Midrash. Now I'll tell you, you know how we saw that there was a lost Midrash, Mekoshesh and all that? The Psikta was lost for a long time. Luckily, it was rediscovered in the 1800s. They finally published the Psikta. And I have a Psikta even at home. And the Psikta goes on and on about the Sheva de Nechamata and the Gimel de Poranuta. All of that comes from the Psikta. The Psikta, by the way, was written where? Well, like many Midrashim, it's from Israel. So what Tosfot is saying is that there are really 2 customs. One custom is what they would lane in Bavel. That's recorded in the Gemara. The Psikta, which is a Medrash, also very, very ancient from Gemara times, was written in Israel, and they did it a different way. And we do the Psikta style. So now